right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Climbing Majority. We're sitting down here with Evan and Ethan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're so psyched to have you guys here. I ran into, this story coming down off of Whitney. We had just done an episode about the Mount Russell trip, a couple episodes back. And, we heard about this story coming down off that mountain. And it was just an inspiring story just because I think there's lots of lessons to be learned. And, we're here to learn as a community and to hear that story. So, why don't you guys just take a second to kind of introduce yourselves, how you found climbing, a quick background about yourselves, maybe how you guys know each other, and, we'll kind of just lead that into the story.
Yeah, sure, Kyle. So my name's Evan Geller. I'm from San Diego. I'm 33 years old. And the way I got into climbing was, back in the day, I think right after I had finished high school, I was living with a guy in a trailer park in Encinitas, and he was working at Vital Climbing Gym in Carlsbad, the first location. And around that time, I had spent, many years just kind of smoking a lot of weed and playing video games and kind of just wasting my life. I was really depressed. And he kind of told me, hey, if you come into Vital, you can climb for free. So I went, had a really good time. And I enjoyed it so much that I essentially traded my television for a pair of climbing shoes and some climbing chalk. Now that I think about it, probably wasn't the best deal in the world, but I don't know. It kind of summed up how desperate I was for something new, Got into it for a little while, bouldering in the gym, pulling on plastic, and kind of fell out of it. Flash forward years later, I'm in a relationship. The relationship isn't going so well. And depression's kind of hitting me. And she very nicely, for a birthday present, got me a membership at Vital. Started climbing again. And I'm part of this generation, I'm kind of ashamed to say it, that got inspired by free solo. So, at first I was really inspired by Alex Honnold and started just kind of doing research. And then I ended up watching Tommy Caldwell, climb Don Wall. And so then the real source of inspiration came to me and essentially put out a post on Facebook asking if anybody would be willing to teach some noobs how to climb. And this guy, Casey Stone, responded, and he ended up teaching me and my best friend, Matthew Johnson, how to climb. And then it just kind of took off from there.
Wow. Super cool. There's a lot of parallels real quick before, we switch stories real quick is I was raised in San Diego too, and I found bouldering in the same gym in Vital.
Nice.
And that gym was really, really, really like formative for myself. Did you go to the one up in Oceanside or the one down in Carlsbad?
In Carlsbad, yeah. The guy who used to work there, his name was Hayden Hill, and he was the one that hooked me up with free passes.
Nice, dude. There's a small chance we actually climbed in the same gym at the same time.
You do look familiar, so I wouldn't be surprised. Hopefully you sandbagged me.
Did you graduate to Mesa Rim at any point? Like, did you get drawn to that gym, or did you even know about it?
I did, yeah. So, eventually I started getting into leading and had to leave Vital and started going to Mesa Rim and, really enjoyed it there. I always will appreciate Vital, though, and Carlsbad specifically. There's just like a piece of my heart is there. Just that's where I kind of got started. But, it's nice to be able to lead over in Mesa Rim for sure.
Yeah, there's a couple parallels because I spent my youth smoking weed and playing video games too. So,
Yeah.
No, it's awesome.
That's funny.
I think most of us did that, huh?
Yeah, honestly, you know what? I have this is obviously tangential from climbing, but I have a lot of really fond memories just ripping video games with good friends, having a good time growing up. I got an N64 as a kid. There's some really amazing moments of my life just having great times with friends and just playing video games. There's something about it. I don't know. So yeah, it's not really relevant to the climbing majority, but fond memories.
It's still nostalgic for me for sure, but I feel like I can't enjoy video games anymore. I just overdid it, unfortunately.
Fair enough. Bring us introduce yourself.
All right. Ethan Morris, San Diego native, grew up in North County. San Marcos to be exact. Just was super into, young skater kid and Also went through the whole smoking weed and video games thing like everybody else, and you know,
Must be a San Diego
yeah,
thing.
it must
Must
be.
be.
Um, yeah, fast forward, like, I got into like a lot of extreme stuff, I would say. Like, I used to like race motorcycles on the track, and just had a love for just going real fast and scaring myself. I got into skydiving for I guess like 12 years ago, and got super into like wingsuiting, and I was a wingsuit coach for a while, and I kind of fell out of love with that sport, and then got into a real brief stint with like speed flying, paragliding down like hills, kiting them up and running off, and I guess the common draw for me was just like scenery and mountains, and I remember one of my coworkers like always had these rock climbing books at I went to sea for 10 years, for scripts. And so anyway, like out on these cruises, I would see these rock climbing books and magazines and stuff, and I always thought, man, that's really intense, And eventually this like kind of progressed. I fell out of love with like skydiving, and then I was just looking for the next thing basically, and the next thing to scare myself, because I started off skydiving like super afraid of heights, and
As one does.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I had somebody take me to Vital for the first time. That was my first introduction to actual rock climbing, pulling on plastic, and I actually got a membership at Vital. I got my tarantula lace, the super beginner shoes.
Yeah.
And got those on, and went to Vital. What was cool about Vital is you could go there at any time, like when you're a member.
Mhm.
So I remember many sessions around midnight, just like too embarrassed to climb around other people because I didn't know what I was doing. But I stuck with it for like 2 years, before I ever actually touched actual rock. And one of my buddies that I know through skydiving and paragliding, he finally took me out to pretty much the local crag here in San Diego, Mission Trails, that super awesome polished rock.
Slip and slide.
Yeah, slip and slide. And that was my first experience outside, and that was in 2018. I looked it up, and I guess I've only been climbing really outside for 5 years, and just inside for 2 years before that. But yeah, just kind of took hold of that, and really got super into climbing. I don't jump too often anymore, but like all my goals have like shifted to rock climbing, snowboarding, stuff that brings me to the mountains really. So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at now.
So there's so many parallels here with just that intro story, right? Pulling on plastic, bouldering gym, San Diego, it's a pretty hot climbing scene for people getting into the sport. Free solo. Like when we talk about the climbing majority, like this kind of story is the essence of the majority. Like this is what we came to represent, is people like this, like people like us. Like we have so many parallels here, and so it's super special. And I think that one of the cool things about this story, because we're leading to the story about an ascent on the East Buttress of Whitney. So not a lot of people take that step to go from plastic to lead climbing, then there's lead to outdoor, and then obviously there's sport to trad. So kind of fast forward us from you guys found climbing. You don't need to take us step by step, but what brought you to trad climbing, and then ultimately what made your eyes set upon an Alpine objective?
I'll let Ethan start with that because he's the one who actually taught me how to trad climb. How did you get into trad climbing, Ethan?
Yeah, so I would, again, went to sea with a guy, engineer, who was super into trad climbing. And at the time I was only sport climbing. I had just come back from a trip in Spain, and he took me on my first multi-pitch. So, going from, the gym to lead climbing in the gym to sport climbing wherever I could. He took me on this multi-pitch, and it was El Wampo, 5'7". He led all the pitches, and I just remember being so like taken back on that climb, because it just felt so adventurous, you know? It was just crazy. He's plugging pieces in and like bringing me up. And I remember, like, you know, after that glorious hand crack, you know, that kind of cluster of rubble up there, I just remember standing on that and being totally terrified, you know? And I just remember thinking, man, this is really, really cool. This, I would be able to, you know, basically take this skill and bring it to the mountains, you know, for some routes that are undeveloped, or, you know, possible FA maybe one day in my future. But mainly, I was just really drawn to these real adventurous climbs that seemed so much different than sport climbing. So, yeah, that's pretty much where that brought me. And then obviously, as my skills and me being in the sport longer has progressed, and then I started setting on my sights on some bigger goals, you know, and a lot of that is just watching my friends, you know. I've got some pretty badass friends, you know, Jonathan and Joshua Rennig, you know, and they're always like crushing it, you know, and
The local legends.
yeah, the local legends. And so anyway, just seeing them and like all the mountains that they've summited and stuff, like, it was really inspiring for me to eventually one day set my sights on a much bigger objective. So yeah, I'll let
Cool, man.
Evan
Yeah.
touch on that or whatever.
Yeah. Please, yeah.
You know, being the guy who was inspired by free solo, I really wanted to get on El Capitan. You know, I was like inspired by the big stone, and it seemed like the ultimate form of adventure. And so that's what I was dedicated to. As soon as I started climbing outside, you know, I was talking about wanting to get on El Capitan, doing the nose. I didn't necessarily want to free solo it. And so as soon as I started feeling good, you know, leading sport, and was happy to take whips here and there on some harder stuff. Essentially, Ethan, I got into contact with Ethan via somebody from Facebook. There, you know, somebody hit me up and they're like, "Hey, I know this guy Ethan. You should climb with him. You guys would get along really well. You'll be buds." And I hit him up, and we met. Me and my buddy Matthew Johnson, we met up with Ethan randomly over in Big Bear, and we climbed trad for the first time. I just kind of followed him up some stuff, and he seemed real confident, like he knew what he was doing, and very safe. And yeah, then we started going on like multi pitches, started hitting to Keats. I think my first route with Ethan was Finger Trip, and then the second one was El Wampo. And it's funny because, you know, we were on our way to El Wampo, and we're supposed to swing leads, and it's a cold day and there's snow down at the base, and Ethan says, "Oh man, I'm feeling a little froggy. It looks like you might have to lead these pitches." And I was not prepared for that because he was the one with the experience. So I shit my pants getting into the splitter crack, El Wampo splitter crack on the second pitch. Just absolutely terrified, hung out at, you know, the crux, getting into it for like 45 minutes, trying to commit and assuming that the gear that I placed was not going to hold and that I'd be swinging into the dihedral, and somehow managed to pull it off. I got a video of myself like screaming, you know, just absolute joy that I didn't fall and die. And yeah, and then after that, I felt that spirit of adventure, and I was like, this is the guy who I should be going on adventures with. And so between him and then my other climbing partner, Bryce Ungersma, I've managed to tune my trad skills to a degree.
Cool, man. Yeah. It's funny too. Like, I know Bryce, I've known him for almost a decade now. We used to party pretty hard back in the day. And just such a rad dude, and just so cool to have all these parallels here. It's just like blowing my mind. But yeah, Bryce is a rad dude, and
Absolutely.
he's gotten so good at climbing so quick. It like blew me away. I was like, what the hell is going on? What is this guy taking? I need to know his secrets.
Mr. Natural, man. Yeah, he's incredible.
He's a natural for sure. Yeah. I saw he has kids, and I was like, all right, I still have a chance.
That's how I feel every time that he has a kid. I'm like, oh, I can catch up to him, and somehow he's still crushing harder than me.
Exactly.
I can't wait for his kid to climb harder than me too. It's gonna be great.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that dad bod is going to take over, you know?
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. So yeah, I mean, you know, you had said, you know, 2 years on plastic, 5 years outside. in general, how many years had it been of climbing experience in general before okay, let me rephrase this question. East Buttress of Whitney, is this your first Alpine objective, or is this, one of many?
Absolute first. Yep. I don't think I've ever even climbed above 10K, honestly. Never even hiked above 10K. I've gotten off ski lifts pretty high, but and just boarded down. So yeah, it was a pretty aggressive first goal, I guess.
That's cool. I mean, how many years of climbing experience have you had? Like, what was it, close to 7?
Yeah,
I think it was
seven total, I guess. Yeah. I kept thinking that it was actually like 7 outside, but I looked back and I was like, dang, it's only been 5 years outside. And, so anyway.
What kind of grades were you climbing up, I guess just in terms of a relative scale for someone listening, it's nice for someone to kind of compare themselves and be like, where am I at? And how would this goal align with kind of where I am as a climber? So if you guys don't mind just kind of sharing where you are at in terms of a technical proficiency.
Yeah. My grades, I consider myself a total comfort climber. So I'm usually just like Mr. Moderate, I'm totally fine climbing, enjoying the view. I'm usually targeting 7s and 8s really. I've had a couple friends like my buddy Jeff that brought me up El Wampo for the first time. I followed him up some like 10A, and I can pull the moves and it's just not there in my head, I guess. So I'd rather not take these big whips, and like I said, I like to cruise,
Dude, 100%, man.
I was pushing grade for a while in trad, comfortably leading 5.9s, even warming up occasionally on 5.9s. But for some reason, the gap between 5.9s and 5.10 minus seemed like a really big jump for me, and I'm still trying to feel comfortable on 10 minus. Unfortunately, before this trip, actually, I was in Mexico at Valle Azteca, and I decided to lead a route that I probably shouldn't have placed gear in, and I ended up decking. So I was kind of, and I know another parallel. And so I'm trying to get, my head back in the game, and I have great partners that have been like really patient, but it's been a process for me. So pushing grade with trad for me is still kind of iffy, but I definitely am inspired and I will never give up.
Nice, dude. Briefly, like what happened?
Sure. Yeah, I'll make it quick. I was about maybe 25, 30 feet up on like a 5.10 finger crack. It was jagged, and I should have known by how jagged it was that the gear wasn't going to hold. I had a black totem in just below me, which is, the piece that gives me the most inspiration, just makes me feel confident. I've whipped on black totems many times where everything else pulled except for black totem, and it didn't hold. And I actually landed on my heroic belayer, and he cushioned the fall. And I popped back up, made sure he was okay. And I had so much adrenaline, I decided to get back on and got back into that same position, and immediately realized that I had screwed up and ended up aiding through the rest of it. So we both walked out pretty much, unscathed, just bruised, but pretty terrified.
Wow.
Yeah, and then later on, he actually sent me a video of somebody on Weekend Whippers decking. Apparently, a bunch of people deck on this crack over at Valle Azteca.
Have either of you felt kind of like pressure from your own expectations of yourself climbing that are kind of incongruent with like what you deep down felt was like ready? And do you feel maybe like your introduction to climbing through media nowadays, which is all too common, of course, watching these amazing aspirational and inspirational films like Free Solo and the Dawn Wall, that kind of affected like your perception of like getting into climbing really hard?
You want to take that first?
Yeah, I would say like, I guess just, comparing myself to others or even these superheroes, is pretty humbling. Like I said, I'm usually just totally fine climbing like the lower grades and enjoying the experience and the view. And, I'm always taken back that when I consider like the grades that these people are, or the caliber of these people that are climbing these grades, it is like so far out of reach for me, you know? And, you know, I do know that I've seen some climbers start off climbing and just be super hard on themselves, you know, like for not getting to this next number, you know, as fast as they thought they should. And for me, I've had to really kind of check that, you know, and just be like, you know, I'm fine where I'm at. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I'm enjoying my time, and that's all. That's why I'm doing it, you know. So that's pretty much like my take on all that.
Yeah, no, I really resonate with that. So like, you know, for me, like I started climbing in 2019. You know, I too was, you know, I'm a part of this group where, you know, media was a huge part of it. I'm so motivated by these individuals, and I felt this really, really large pressure that I put on myself to excel in climbing in a way that was not congruent with my physical reality or skill set at the time, you know, and that put a lot of pressure for me to like want to take risk and try and excel in a way that like didn't actually feel good for me, you know. And I felt pressured. I made a horrible mistake. I had a terrible accident, you know. And so I just think this is this kind of common theme that we do see on, you know, our show and with talking with individuals. And, you know, like I'm like you guys, man, like, you know, like I love cruiser, you know, 5'7", 5'8", 5'9" trad. That's my bread and butter. Like I do climb like low tens sometimes and stuff, and I'm really trying to break into that. But, you know, my excursion and trying to break into that too fast didn't feel good for me. It wasn't right for me as a climber. And then of course, like post injury, I've now had this massive process of rebuilding myself psychologically to get comfortable and into the gear. So it just it is, I think, this all too common thing with climbing, with feeling like you should be doing more than you are, if that makes sense. And it's like a pressure you put on yourself, but also there's all these things in the environment that we're, you know, like Kyle and I just before this conversation we're talking about Babsy. She sent like Meltdown, Beth Rodden's really famous 514C. You know, you watch that and you're like, it's the sickest thing ever. You're like, look at these people like sending so hard, climbing so hard. And like, I mean, we don't even have to go there. Like I could just like 12A on gear would be like a more reasonable, like long-term life goal for me or something, you know, like that stuff's just like, I look at that and it's just like, almost like emotions that you wouldn't associate with sports, like disgust, or like you're like, how do you even climb this? Like we're not the same species, you know, like that's just so impossible. Yeah. Sorry.
I think the funny thing is, and this is what Evan brought up, it's like he started climbing early on and with the goal of like, I'm going to go climb El Cap, right? Yeah. And I think that's like a pretty common thread. I felt like that way. I've got a map of El Cap on my wall that I bought when I first started climbing.
Yeah.
And like, you know, the first thing you think of, you're like, okay, what's the grade? You're like, okay, if I aid through the crux pitch, it's 11A. You're like, okay, I could send 10A. I got this.
Yeah.
I got this. You know, you're like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so, you know, like there's like these unrealistic expectations of yourself because you like connect the dots in a straight line. Whereas in reality, it's this nest of multi-directional experiences and understanding of the sport that gets you to be able to climb something like that. Like, you know, Joey Latina, who has been on the show, he's, you know, 18, he's climbing 13s sport, he's climbing 12s trad, and he's just starting to think about climbing the freerider. And so it's like, you know, like he has a level head on his shoulders. He actually understands, you know, what it takes to do something like that. And I think in the beginning, when you get so psyched on, you know, free solo and you see all these crazy mountains and your only understanding of the difficulty is the grades, it's really easy to kind of like whitewash it all down and make it seem way more achievable than it is. And then, you know, you can quickly get yourself in over your head, you know, and get yourself above gear when you're unable to down climb. And, you know, that's when disaster happens. So it's just, it's an interesting place for a beginning climber.
Absolutely. I think, you know, it's a common trend in any sport that we get into is to compare ourselves to our peers, you know, in the sport, like when we all get into a sport at the same time, especially, you know, like when I got into skydiving, it was, you know, I had a pretty tight knit group that, you know, we all had a goal of wingsuiting, you know. And some of us progressed into that discipline like a lot faster than others and had the ability to fly our bodies like way better than others and stuff like that. And it's like, I think whenever I get into something, whether it's surfing, golf, whatever, I have to constantly reassess my ability and like eat a slice of humble pie, basically, and just try to like recalibrate myself and my progression and kind of build upon my small, like, achievements, So yeah, I think that's super common in any sport, literally.
I think something's funny about climbing,
it,
particularly for me. Sorry, just 1 second here. That I found really interesting about climbing for me about this like topic of humble pie is, for anybody who's probably been in a gym experience, you'll, at least my experience there is, it's the most humbling thing ever, because there's usually like the kids climbing teams, like the youth, like, and like
Yeah.
I'll be like looking, I'm like, oh, that could be my long-term project set there or something, and then some like 10-year-old child like just like walks up and like starts climbing it and on-sighting it. It's like, it's just such a humbling experience, just be like, wow, I'm gonna spend the next 10 years of my life trying to progress to what this like literal child just like walked up, so I think it's just like a good humbling experience, and there's something about it that I was reminiscing and laughing about. But climbing is a very humble experience, and if you're there, in this kind of egocentric way, looking for outcomes and not focusing on like you're comparing yourself to your previous self, then yeah, you're probably going to be left perpetually dissatisfied, because there's like 7-year-olds right now who are better than you will be in 15 years if you dedicated your whole life to it. It's like, it's just a bad game to play. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Evan, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say a big part of it for me is that all this stuff seemed impossible at first. Like the first time I went out and climbed on top rope at Mission Trails, Crack of Dust, I did not see myself getting to the top. And when I got to the top, I felt proud, and it made me wonder what else I was capable of. And that's why I like pushing. It's not so much because I want to be one of the greats. It used to be like that. And then I came to realize that I can just be my own great, and that's fine. But every time that I push myself and I get to the top, it's not just that feeling of overcoming a challenge, but it's wow, what else can I do? I want to find out. And it's one of the things I love about pushing grades specifically. But that being said, I also thought I was hot shit when I started climbing. I thought I was so cool. And now I'm like, this is for fucking nerds. We're all a bunch of nerds worshiping rocks. There's really, it's cool. Don't get me wrong. I obviously love it, but I don't tell people this is the coolest shit ever. You should come and try this anymore. It's like, if somebody wants to go climbing, I'm down, but yeah. The other thing is that I see routes, 512, 513s that are out of my realm that I'm inspired by. And I would love to be able to get on those routes sometimes. I'd love to get on Astroman. I used to really want to get on the Vampire over at Tequite. I was inspired by that. And so it would be really cool to be able to lead those things.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance for sure, to want to push yourself and to be safe at the same time. And then there's the whole conversation of, how do you spend as much time as you need to progress in the grades, and then where's the career come into it, and how are we making money, and it's just a big mess, but we're all here for it.
I will say, when I decked, I was definitely being very cocky, and I recognized that. I was like egotistical when I hopped up that route and didn't even think about it, and humbled myself. So now I have to reevaluate, which is actually, I don't know, it's just a part of it, and I kind of enjoy reevaluating it now.
Yeah, and you did it without any price paid, which is pretty awesome.
Got lucky. I had a heroic belayer that caught me, really.
Yeah, you're lucky you didn't injure him or her.
Yeah, very lucky.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's dive in. Let's dive into the story here. So, give us a rundown of kind of like, what your plan was, who you were climbing with, and logistically kind of what you guys were up against. We are talking about the East Buttress of Whitney.
Yeah, so I always wanted to get over to Whitney. I was always very inspired by, the 14ers, and I started bagging peaks very recently. And essentially, we have two mutual friends. It's a boyfriend and girlfriend, one from Florida and then one from Texas. And they've been climbing with them for a while, and they mentioned that they were going on a 4-month trip, and they wanted to start with East Buttress of Mount Whitney, and then they wanted to go do a big wall in Yosemite, which I had been training for, south face of Washington Column. And so we discussed it. I asked them if I could bring Ethan. They said absolutely. I actually know them because of Ethan. So we all started training. I started, bagging the local 14ers, closest by, and was a little bit worried about altitude sickness because I've had issues with altitude in the past. So the whole thing was very intimidating for me, but I was very, very inspired. And my climbing partner, Bryce, was telling me stories about Whitney, about mithril dihedral, Mount Russell, positive vibrations over at, the Incredible Hulk. And so it's something that I always wanted to get into. And I think Ethan had always been really interested as well, but it wasn't quite on his radar at the time. And so when they brought it up to us, I said, bet, let's do this. That sounds awesome. Ethan's on board. Let's do it. And so we were training, and, time came to go to Mount Whitney, and they took off before us. Then they had kind of mentioned to us beforehand their plan. And at one point, my buddy had kind of just thrown out that he was thinking about simul climbing it with a 40-meter rope. And between him and his girlfriend, they probably each had about maybe 1.5 to 2 years of experience. So still pretty new, but they both pick up very, very quickly, very safe climbers. The guy, actually, the way I met him is he started climbing lead rope solo because he didn't have any partners. And Ethan hit me up and he said, you got to go climb with this guy. He needs some partners. He doesn't need to be lead rope soloing right now. So, I definitely trusted him, but I did mention, I don't think it's a good idea to bring a 40-meter or to simul climb. I think that's a terrible idea. I think the words that I said was, you're going to die. And so, just kind of moved on, and fast forward, we're heading over to Whitney, and we're really excited. They're there the day before, and Ethan and I are on our way. And as soon as we get up to the portal, Ethan actually starts not feeling too well, so next morning comes and we're all supposed to be heading up to the portal, and our friends decide to head up and we decide to go down so that we can acclimate a little bit, and so that Ethan could, talk with his buddy, Jonathan Reneg, and get some advice. So the deal was we meet them up at Upper Boy Scout the next day. And if we're not there the next day, they continue without us. Ethan ended up feeling a lot better, after talking to his buddy Jonathan, got some inspiration. We decided to go back up to 8,000 feet and acclimate a little bit. And so by the end of the night, we were both feeling good, woke up the next morning, and we made the trek up to Upper Boy Scout. And I think we got off route a little bit on the way somehow, of course. But, the hike wasn't too bad. Started feeling the altitude near the end of the last push up to Upper Boy Scout. But we ended up meeting up with our friends and enjoyed a breathtaking view, and, felt real proud of ourselves, a little intimidated for what was to come the next morning. But the plan was to wake up with an Alpine start, get our coffee and our breakfast in, and be at the base as the sun was coming up, the typical move for Alpine climbing.
Real quick, so were you guys planning on climbing the route together or staggered? Were they going to go first? What was kind of the logistics there? And maybe talk to me a little bit about you questioned his decision to simul with a 40 by, saying that he's going to kill himself. But did he come back with well, this is why, did he have a logical explanation for why he wanted to, or had he simuled before? Maybe talk to us a little bit about kind of what you think his decision process there was.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's actually pretty important. So, I think a big part of it was that they looked at the grade, which is 5.7, 5.8, and we're under the impression that a good majority of it was 4th and 5th class scrambling. So I think in his mind, he was thinking this should be really easy. We're not going to be falling on this. It's mostly going to be hiking, really exposed rock, protected, and I think that they also both just had a lot of confidence in themselves and in each other. So I think maybe it would have been a good idea if I had mentioned that most Alpine routes don't warrant an R rating, but typically are rated R. There's plenty of sections where if you fall, there's severe consequences. I kind of just assumed that they knew that, and I probably shouldn't have assumed that because now that I look back, I'm not sure if they really realized that. But I think they were just thinking it was going to be a safe romp on some 5.7, honestly, with mostly fourth and fifth class. So they were thinking they can move fast and be really efficient. And by the end of it, they'd have simul climbing down. And that would have been their first time ever simuling as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you guys were going up there and you guys were planning on pitching it out. I'm assuming you guys brought a 60 meter. And you guys were planning on starting after them, like slightly staggered, or kind of what was your approach there?
We didn't really have a plan for staggered or not, but I figured once we got up there, I basically got geared up and we took off first. So obviously on the route, there are many ways up it. There's multiple spots where you can actually climb, together in parallel. So anyway, we started up, and yeah, like I said, there was no real plan on who should go first or who shouldn't, or who should be trailing,
My thought was, though, that if they were going to bust out a 40 meter when we start climbing, if there was a possibility that was still going to happen, that we should go ahead, because I pretty much assumed that it was their choice, and despite it being a bad choice, and that we shouldn't, have to trail behind their slow ascent. And, not to be a dick or anything like that, but at that point we needed to make sure that we were moving and grooving and getting up to the top before, we were in danger.
Okay, first question, what time did you guys get to the base? Were you guys Alpine start, or was it like a late start?
Well, yeah, we were supposed to start as the sun came up, and I thought we were moving fast, but we started at like 9 o'clock in the morning somehow.
Okay. From the tent or at the base?
We left Upper Boy Scout at we got up at 3:30 and then we left around 4:15. So then we hiked up there up to Glacier. We got water on the way, stashed our gear, our trekking poles and stuff. What else? We had trekking poles and some other our water filter, stuff like that. We stashed at a rock near
Iceberg.
Iceberg, sorry.
Iceberg.
Yeah. We started from there. We got geared up, put our ice axes in our packs because the notch was actually frozen over, and we heard about that. So we heard multiple parties say that was actually the crux of the whole climb for them. It was the most scariest. So
yeah, we were hearing stories about people rappelling off of trekking poles in the icy notch. So we were already kind of terrified of that descent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just want to back up real quick too, because when I got up to the portal and I started feeling, this massive headache, altitude sickness. So I had 3 hours of sleep that night.
Oh yeah.
We went back down to Lone Pine. I felt like $1 million all of a sudden. You
also had COVID right before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah. I was on a work trip and had COVID a week before all this too. So anyway, then we go back up, and the night before we were going to hike up to Upper Boy Scout, I also got 3-4 hours of sleep. So I just really wasn't sleeping too well. And I figured once we got up to Upper Boy Scout, I'd be so exhausted that I would get a good night's rest. So sure enough, I wake up right in the middle of the night and I'm thinking about this 40-meter rope, thinking, oh, great. Now that's actually limited us to a 40-meter rappel, and now we have one longer end, because if we have to tie the ropes together, we're stuck at 40 meters, right?
That's
so
only 20 meters at a time, I think.
Yeah. So it was a bummer. Instead of having a full 60 meter with a double rope. That's all I could think about.
You guys were planning on wrapping down together as a team, two sets of teams?
As a team, yeah. And that was the plan, to get through the notch.
No one had a tagline or Beal escaper, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. And it sounds like this 40-meter rope decision was a pretty large source of tension between your guys' parties. It sounds like you guys were like, hey, don't do it, it's a bad idea. And they're like, fuck you, we're doing it anyway. All the way up until the end. I think that, you had said that there were some words that you guys exchanged right before you left.
Yeah. Just
the base of the route.
Yeah, just as Ethan, he leads the first pitch, and I'm standing right next to my buddy's girlfriend, and he's also leading directly next to Ethan, and Ethan yells, "Evan, on belay, climb on, and I look over at my buddy's girlfriend and I said, I told you guys not to bring a 40 meter. That was a bad call. And I started climbing, and I did not mean to be that dramatic. It was just what came out. But I think I really freaked her out, and maybe subconsciously I wanted to freak her out so that maybe by the time she got up to him, she could tell him that maybe they should head back down. I don't know exactly what was going on subconsciously, but there must have been some reason why I said that so dramatically.
I mean, it just sounds like some frustration. It sounds like there was a lack of communication or a lack of teamwork. You know, it's like if you guys were planning on climbing this together, then there should be some terms agreed upon. If you guys are climbing it separate, then fine, do your own thing, but don't rely on us, and we won't rely on you, and we won't try to work this together, you know? It seems like there was a kind of a mixed bag of kind of things going on where it's like you guys were together, but you also weren't at the same time. So, you know, things weren't agreed upon. So I think that's, you know, there's some tension there for sure.
We wanted to be together. When they busted out the 40, it turned into, all right, I guess it's every man for themselves at this point. So Ethan and I just started moving, and yeah.
So you guys didn't know it was a 40 until the last fucking second right before you guys started climbing, or what?
Yeah.
I didn't, and that's part of my fault for not checking, like, you know, everybody's gear down at the portal. But Evan knew that they were bringing a 40, or at least planning on it.
I knew they had talked about it, and I was hoping that they had taken my advice, and then found out once we had gotten to Whitney that they had brought the 40.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so they left for the hike a day before us because of my altitude sickness.
Mm-hmm.
So our plan was to rally with them up at Upper Boy Scout, and then you know, we would be back on schedule to make the ascent the next morning.
So you guys are climbing. What happened next?
Yep. So yeah, I remember I got up to I took the first pitch, you know, just to get right into it, and I remember we realized that we were already off route. So we were supposed to start off in a little dihedral. We hiked up just to the right of it, so we had to go up and over this little like arete, I guess, to get back on route. And then once I got in there, I looked up and I said, Evan, this looks like the route. You know, I think we're good here. So I was belaying him up, and I remember our other buddy was like, I heard some frustration because he had a ice axe on his back, and he was like kind of in this little like overhanging area. So he was already getting held up, you know? So I remember I had come around this move, and it was like a little awkward, but you know, I'm just thinking we got to move, because actually there was a potential storm on the horizon at 2 p.m. So what was it?
It said 20% chance of precipitation,
so, like 100. Basically.
Yeah, I was on the fishhook arete when that storm. Like we were on the same day, and I remember looking up at the clouds and like, fuck.
Yeah.
Like, God damn it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like we're fucked. It was just like, we could be fucked.
Yeah, exactly. So we basically had a 5-hour window that we were like, we need to, you know, get up this thing. And so Evan and I were swinging leads, like just spot on, you know, like being real efficient, passing gear. You know, Evan took the next pitch, and that was when we left the other two climbers basically at that first pitch. So Evan and I were going, and you know, we had Rocky Talkies, and those things are amazing. So we were just able to communicate really well, tell each other how we're doing, you know, hey, good job, you know, you're crushing it, whatever, pumping each other up. And I don't even know how many pitches we did.
Around the 5th or 6th.
Yeah, I think we're about
top of the 5th, maybe
6 pitches up. That's when we got a hail over the radio and said, hey, Evan, Ethan, we're in trouble. And so we were like, oh, okay, elaborate, you know. And at this time it was I think about 12:30 by then. Yeah, something like that. And so they were saying, we're in trouble.
We're in over our heads.
Yeah.
This route is spicier than we realize. We're not going to be able to swing leads. Simuling is not working out, and we're too high up to be able to wrap down with the amount of gear that we have, wrapping 20 meters at a time. So they're, you know, basically asking us if they could, you know, tail our rope and just micro tracks every single pitch on our rope. And, you know, I think I kind of talked to Ethan. I'm saying, hey, what do you think about this? We're kind of in a bit of a bind here. This kind of changes everything. It's supposed to rain by 2 p.m. It can get real serious. We started late. What should we do? And we both determined we can't leave our friends. There's absolutely no way that we could morally make that decision. So, we tried to encourage them to lead. That was the idea. Say, we'll just tell them, build them up, tell them that they got this. And, our buddy decided that he would continue to try, and we decided we would wait for him to try to get to us. And by the time that he gets to us, it had taken, an extra hour. They were moving real slow because they were shooken up. And so we decided to let them micro tracks, essentially our rope. And Ethan and I kind of coordinated. So Ethan determined that the best thing for me to do was going to be to play rope gun, and that he would hang in the back and just kind of keep everybody with a positive mindset and make sure that they were constantly safe and tied into the system so that nobody, was injured or something worse. So yeah, we kind of just got into survival mode, when your eyes get real wide all of a sudden and you're just reacting and you're not even thinking. You almost get like a clear mind. I just got into rope gun mode and started leading pitch after pitch after pitch.
I just want to back you up just a little bit. So when I was waiting on that ledge after they had hailed us, Evan said, hey, go ahead and fix the rope. So I went ahead and, fixed the rope for them to come up the single strand. And as I'm waiting there, I ended up waiting there for 2.5 hours, so I thought they were like really close to us. And meanwhile, they're moving like really slow at this point. Fatigue has really set in for them. And I went from a little nice bomber ledge in the sun to complete shade, right? So by the time they actually got up to me, my teeth are chattering, my legs are, moving. And then that's when we decided, all right, in the interest of time, Evan, you need to play rope gun. When our buddies got up to us, I could just see that blank stare on their face, almost like kind of half with it, like almost nobody's home. So I knew that there was some like cognitive issues there, with just being safe. And so I was talking him through literally every like action, basically, like telling him like, okay, get out of locker, come into the shelf right here, get a clove hitch, like tie in there, lock it down. I was like, you're safe now, right? And just vocalizing all the steps, and just really keeping him with me. And so, unfortunately, his girlfriend had gotten a bit hysterical and she was crying at some point. And, so anyway, they just felt like they were just like really, I guess in over their heads, beat down, fatigued, and just really just at this point, just probably just wanting to be off the rock, and I know we've all been there, whether it be a storm coming in or whatever, but
there had been questions about, a potential rescue a few times where Ethan and I were just like, no, we're not there. It's not necessary. We're just going to keep moving.
Yep. So yeah, I'll let you keep talking about the pitching it out.
Yeah. So as I'm pitching it out, I end up getting a bit off route, and I end up in like no man's land, in an area filled with like death blocks and ice and snow. And I feel like an idiot for doing it, but it's where I ended up, and I couldn't quite reverse what I was doing. So I ended up setting an anchor, communicated with everybody, and brought 3 people over into this horrible area on the rock. And so for the next pitch, I ended up having to do some pretty unprotected, like what felt like 10A, but probably was like 5.8, but in the heat of the moment just felt a lot harder than what I was expecting in a really exposed position. But I remember just climbing so well. I couldn't understand how I was climbing so well. I think it's because I was tapped into survival mode. So I managed to get us out of that position, and we start moving. And at this point, each individual pitch is taking us like an hour and a half,
because we're limited to 30 meters at this point. So basically the rig that we had was we had Evan on lead, somebody tied into the middle of the 60, and then they would haul up their partner on the 40. So that's the only way we could really divvy up the rope to like get everybody safe, not simul climbing, and build the anchors along the way, So it was taking forever at this point.
Yeah, so I remember, there was like one single pitch that I was trying to avoid. It was the off width. Not much of an off width climber, and I heard something about like a 5.9 or 10.8, potential off width pitch, and somehow, I ended up getting on it, of course. And I remember everybody kind of cursing me, like, "What the hell, dude? Why did you choose the off width?" But we ended up making it through. We actually ended up summiting like 9:30 p.m.
Yeah. Forever.
It was dark. I don't know how we didn't get rain because, I don't know too much about Whitney, but what I've been told is that, if it says 10%, almost guaranteed you're going to be getting rain by 2 p.m. And it was 20%. And somehow we didn't get any rain. And I don't really know how to explain that. I'm just really grateful. But once we got up to the top, we were all freezing. I couldn't feel our hands, couldn't feel our feet. We were planning on wrapping the icy notch and pretty much had decided immediately that we weren't in the position to be able to do that. So
not at night anyway.
Yeah. So we got prepared to hunker down in the little, I don't know if you'd call it a cabin or what would you call that thing up top?
Yeah. Just a stone house. I don't know.
Little open door structure at the top, and I've admittedly been through a few epics myself, in my days of climbing. So I'd hunkered down in some classic shiver bivvies a couple of times. So I think I was a little bit more prepared for it than everybody else. Ethan had brought an extra pair of socks, which was really smart. I think he was the only person that had extra socks. I brought gloves. Nobody else had gloves. Our friends had an emergency blanket, but limited layers.
Yeah, I had my snowboarding gloves too.
Yeah, you had gloves.
Yep.
But the thing is, the little hut up top, since the doors open and we had just gotten a huge, what San Diego or California would consider a big snowstorm. It was extra icy, as you know, around that time. So the wind had actually blown in a bunch of snow into the hut and created a massive ice block right in the middle of the floor. So the floor was frozen and wet. And so sleeping on the floor was actually made us more cold. I ended up just laying down we had the 60 meter. I ended up like trying to sleep on the 60 meter. And just as I was starting to fall asleep, they woke me up and they had basically determined that they were worried about hypothermia and frostbite because they hadn't been able to feel their fingers and their hands for a while. And that the best thing to do seemed to be to go to a lower altitude. And since we weren't able to do the icy notch or not feeling up to it, we only had one other option, which was to do the 11-mile hike back down to the portal. And yeah, so crampons and ice axes, first time we've ever even used any of this stuff. We make the trek down. It's like 11:30 at night at this point. And it's funny because, just as we were coming down, I think some lady all by herself, she must have been like 45, 50 years old, just came up with no crampons, no ice axe, just hiking through the ice, like it was no big deal. And we were getting ready for like the biggest trek of our lives with the most fatigue we've ever experienced to mish down the 99 switchbacks. At one point, we had been dealing with so much fatigue that heading towards the 99 switchbacks, we actually lost sight of our friends who kind of knew the route a bit better than us. And Ethan and I started heading straight towards like imminent death. We realized that like where we were heading was extremely steep. And if we had continued, we probably would have slipped to our death. Just in time, we turned left and we saw lights off in the distance. So we made a sharp left and got back on trail. The fatigue was so bad, that every mile that we hiked, our bodies forced us to take a 15-minute nap. We would all sit down at the same time. No choice, just our bodies would force us to, and we'd lay down. Next thing you know, all of our eyes would be closed and we'd all wake up at the same time within 15 minutes, wide-eyed. Hey, let's hit it. Let's keep going. 11 miles, like 11 naps.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yeah. It was 10 hours of marching. So it was just, we ended up finally getting all the way down to the van at like 9 a.m. So it was just incredible fatigue for myself, like 3 hours, maybe 4 hours the next night of sleep, and then 2.5 hours that night, like to start this actual summit push. And so for some reason, I didn't feel like tired like I have, in the past, where you have that sand in the eyes feeling or anything like that. It was more or less just complete and utter body fatigue where I felt like I wanted to collapse, So I had brought enough snacks to last me, as like maybe an emergency to ration some, but mainly to like get us like up to the summit, down the notch, down the Mountaineers route, back to our gear, and then back to camp, and not like an additional 10 hours of fatigue and hiking and stuff like that. So yeah, it was super brutal. I had those like chest pains, where you feel like your body's eating itself, and just super, super exhausted, fatigued. My back was hurting so bad from the mini day pack, with all the weight in it, with my climbing shoes and the gear and all that stuff, that I just kept telling Evan, like, hey, I got to lay down. And I would lay on, a very cold frozen rock. And then, we would wake up 10, 20 minutes later and keep marching on.
Usually surrounded by hikers that were on their way up, wondering what the hell was going on with us.
Yeah.
We talked to so many people on the way down that rumors flew around the mountain within a day, and everybody knew that we were the idiots that pulled an epic on East Buttress of Mt. Whitney.
Yeah.
Oh man, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. So since we got back to the van at like 9 a.m., we had the most epic mediocre breakfast that we've ever had at the portal. Got some hot coffee, went to sleep, basically slept until the next day, and then we had to make the march up to go pick up our gear. And so that was another 9-hour round trip, hiking back up to go get our tents and all that stuff, which we had right on the lake, which was probably the most magical place I've ever camped in my life. But at this point, my Achilles was already giving me some like issue. I was like, oh man, this thing's really tight. I don't know what's going on. And I just powered through it. And then when I got back from the hike, I looked down and my ankle was completely blown up. So I definitely strained my Achilles. And so that pretty much tabled we were headed to Yosemite after this trip.
You were supposed to do the south face of Washington Column. Needless to say, It did not end up happening.
So yeah, that pretty much completed my climbing for this whole week-long excursion. And I had to like soak my leg in the river in Yosemite, and just try to ice it as much as possible, elevate it and stuff. So yeah, that was basically the mission right there. It was
did like panic ever set in to any member of the group? Because in an extreme situation like that, like that's where panic can like start to creep. Did you see it in anybody's eyes?
Definitely, panic was set in early on in our other friends' eyes, for sure. I mean, when we got up into the house, 3/4 of the floor was complete ice block, so I was shiver-bivvying in one little corner with my back on the stone wall. Evan was in the doorway. I found a little sign that I was able to prop up in the door to block some of the wind coming in, and then they were laying together with an emergency blanket, and they still couldn't feel their feet, So I think for them it was pretty scary, like for that part. For me, when we were shiver-bivvying up in that little house, I knew it was going to be a really miserable night. So I just decided, why don't we just start hiking? 11 miles didn't sound too long at that time. And I was thinking, yeah, let's get to lower elevation. Let's get some warmth and get away from this wind chill, because it was like in the high 20s and it was pretty freaking cold, Luckily, I had a puffy and multiple layers on, my snowboarding gloves. I had a decent set of boots. So So I was pretty good, wool socks, and like Evan said, I had some spare socks and stuff. But yeah, I think panic set in pretty early for them, and that's why I was like really focused on calming them down. And they actually told me later on that I was like instrumental in them like keeping it together, or just being able to like talk to them, like just real matter of fact, like just talk to them about what step they need to do. I confirmed with them multiple times, like, you're safe now, right? Just stuff like that. Just I think in like some severe situations where things can get really bad, I have a knack for just like kind of really focusing up and like making my way through, like unpacking each step that needs to take place for things to go really well.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. So, like, what are some like key takeaways from you guys? Like, what do you think you could do to help kind of prevent a situation like that in the future for yourselves?
Well, I think Evan and I have talked about going back up and doing like, something on Mount Russell next or something like that. And I think our biggest takeaway was that we want to go by ourselves. Really, it's I mean, it's real unfortunate to say that, but at the same time, like, I feel just like Evan said, like early on in the story, it's like you have your friends there with you. We should be self-supporting in our own teams, but at the same time, you're totally torn because you don't want to leave people friends or even anybody really back to be fend for themselves in such a situation where they are not having a good time, and it looks like it could go really bad for them. And then you're torn because you're in the Alpine, right? So it's like what they do could totally put everybody in jeopardy, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why I think like going forward, we'll have like an in-reach and stuff like that for like emergency, but it would be just really ideal to be like self-supporting and self-sufficient as just a team of two.
Do you normally bring a tagline on any adventures or anything you've ever done? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I honestly, I don't think I was prepared to have to rappel at all. I really think that I was ready for East Buttress. I think Ethan and I both were. And in my mind, there was no doubt I was getting up. And maybe that's one of my downfalls, is that no matter how confident you are, you should always be prepared and have a backup plan of how to get off, because really the most successful you could be is just coming home safely by whatever means, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to essentially. Yeah, it's just like, it can even be something as simple as like, hey, a random rock falls because of freeze thaw cycle and cuts your rope in half. You got one rope and you're just both sitting there going like, well, fuck, it's like, yeah. So I would definitely say like tagline Beal Escaper is definitely going to be a good thing in the future for sure. Yeah, that's a crazy story, man. Just to like be in somewhere that committed, and like I'm not like the most adverse experienced Alpine climber. I have some of my own experience, but yeah, it's just a very different process being up there. It's like much more committing, much less forgiving environment, more run out, more rock fall, more variables to consider, and yeah, it's really serious. And also like, you might be the 11 or 12 sport climber in the gym, or maybe you just always on site 10B, 10C trad. Like, that's great. But like, if you've done that in really, really like calculated, controlled environments and these circumstances, but then you might be on a 5.9 and all of a sudden it's horrifically run out. You've got to make sure you're not pushing rock off onto a belayer. You're frozen, exhausted, glucose deprived, and shitting your pants. Then it's like, it's not the same thing anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, maybe you climb 10B in the gym, but have you ever done that in the worst position ever while you feel like you got to shit your pants or something? You know what I mean? Like, it's just things can get really serious really quick. And I think that as climbers, we need a really healthy respect for the environments we're going into, and to turn down the hubris dial, it's like, and because I'm sure we've all been there, just like you're just.
I think that it's pretty surprising to me though that this party went from I'm gonna Simul the East Buttress to yeah. I can't even lead a single pitch. And to me that's like pretty shocking. And I don't know what that is attributed to or how you could mitigate, someone's decision like that. Like, is it something that you didn't know about the person? Like, what do you think happened there? I mean, there's obviously just like a freeze up, but, you know, did they have, obviously there's not enough experience, but is there something that you guys missed maybe in terms of judging their personalities, or, how could you have avoided maybe climbing with them in the first place, knowing that, how, I guess you get what I'm trying to ask here. Like,
Sure.
was there some sort of way you could avoid that?
I think it's honestly, it's not too different from me being cocky and getting on a trad route and decking. Overstoker. Sometimes I can be an overstoker. I think that they were overly stoked. I think that they had too much confidence in themselves. I don't think that they had enough experience where they've heard of enough situations or scenarios where shit's gotten real. One quote that comes to mind, and there's different forms of adventure, but it ain't adventure until shit starts going wrong. And everybody wants adventure until it's adventure time, right? And don't get me wrong, you don't always have to seek out that form of adventure. But I think that's what it comes down to, is I had a better idea of what happens when shit goes wrong to a degree. And I don't think they did, because they were limited experience, right? And, people come out of the gym, and this, again, no offense to my friends, because honestly, I've been climbing with them for a while, and this might be one of the only 2 mistakes I've ever seen them make. Then again, it only takes one bad mistake sometimes. But, sometimes people come out of the gym and they think about grades, and they don't see the bigger picture, which is everything else to take into account. Weather, which is constantly changing, altitude, your ability to synchronize with your partner. Simuling requires typical practice and a lot of good communication and a lot of good synchronicity. And typically your strongest climber needs to be the follower, right? And in this situation, I don't think that they knew that, because if that was the case, they would have known that the only person that could lead was the stronger climber, because they had really the only leading experience. And, they mentioned to me that, now we know that Alpine routes are rated R. And, some people would even say that the East Buttress is a peewee route, and it's really pretty mellow compared to a lot of other routes. It really is all relative. But I think the key point is that sometimes you don't know until you're in the situation. And so I like to make an effort of learning from all of my friends' mistakes so that I don't have to learn from my own mistakes. And I've just had more opportunity to learn from more friends' mistakes, to be honest. And I also take responsibility, because I think that I probably could have done a little bit more investigation, found out for sure whether or not they were bringing the 40, put my foot down. But a part of me also, it kind of scares me, because if we hadn't showed up that day, I wonder, most likely they would have hopped on by themselves on a 40. And who knows, maybe if they didn't have somebody to rescue them, maybe they would have gotten up on their own. Maybe they would have wrapped down earlier, or maybe they would have ended up getting, stuck. And there's just so many different things that could have happened. I'm honestly just glad that we were there. And even though it didn't go the way that I would have liked, it's still one for the books. And, the important thing is that we all made it back safely. And I think we all walked away with some very, very valuable lessons that are ultimately going to help us in the future.
For sure, man. And that's why we're sitting down here. It's like, everybody makes mistakes. We all get ourselves into these situations. I've done it. It's not anything new. And we're not here to shame anybody. It's all about just taking these experiences and learning from them, because, shit does get real. And, it's a matter of, how do we avoid these situations in the first place? And then also, what is it like when you're in them, so that you can better understand how to handle it?
Yeah.
And so, that's why we're here. So, I appreciate you guys sitting down and telling the story.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you guys listening.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a wild story, man. It's pretty crazy. It's I mean, strangely enough, I really want to climb the Buttress of Whitney now. I don't know why your story has inspired me to do that, but I mean, I was looking at some pictures beforehand and stuff. It looks like a really just stellar, beautiful climb in Whitney Basin. From I've seen a lot of footage and stuff from Kyle's ascent there on the Fishhook in that area. It just looks really beautiful. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. And while I was up there, I was able to take some photos because obviously we're there at sunset, you know. So I got to take some really incredible photos. And my buddy said, "Well, at least you get to see Whitney. How almost nobody gets to see Whitney, you know." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know if that's super great, but
great selling
you know,
point.
yeah, we did survive
Dude,
it.
I love sunsets on mountains, man.
Yeah.
I always find myself on the top of them at sunset, and I'm always just like, this is the best.
Yep.
Yeah, we had to go visit Josh Rennig too over at the climbing portal, and I think he was the perfect person to see directly after pulling an epic on.
Yeah.
He's probably just like, "Oh, you guys are fine. That was sick, huh?
Yeah,
you know what
He's like,
happened?"
I'll tell you some stories.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah, Jonathan did. His brother called me right after and said, "Well, congratulations on your first Alpine route." You know, so that
There you
that was
go.
pretty
Yeah.
cool. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, one
Yeah,
more
that's
one more
awesome,
thing to note as well. So
Yeah.
while we were heading back up, I was ahead of the group, to go retrieve our gear after going back down to the portal. And I guess there was a San Diego local named Kellen, don't know the guy's last name, and he was on his way down from summiting after us at 11:30, 12 o'clock in the morning. Him and his partner apparently summited, and it was like no big deal to them. I don't know where his partner was. I don't know what happened, but we only met Kellen, and he was drinking a handle of Fireball and taking shots for each individual person that he passed on the way down. So, I guess it's all relative.
Perspective.
Yeah,
Perspective.
Yeah, respect.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was wondering why we took off because he said, "Oh, all of us could have huddled together, you know, in the frozen house."
He's like, "I brought the fireball."
Yeah.
Maybe that's the secret. You got to bring
Yeah.
That's
Fireball,
the secret. Yeah.
Then you can
Yeah.
hunker down.
So
I
funny.
think just built from a different cloth is the reality.
Yeah.
So,
It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll forever be impressed by that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's probably shivered on the top of a mountain more than you can count on your hands. So, the next time you guys are up in that situation, hopefully it's a different scenario, but it'll be less foreign.
Yeah.
Yep.
Nice. Awesome, guys. Yeah, I mean, thanks for coming on the show. It's always great to have these conversations, and respect what you're doing. What's next?
Shoot.
What's next for you guys?
I want to get on some grade 5 big walls, so I'm planning on going back to Yosemite, and basically every year I plan to do a grade 5 big wall, and then weather ends up interrupting the plan, so I end up getting on some crazy grade 4 big wall. And so I'm going to get on the south face of Washington Column, the west face of the Leaning Tower, and the Prow next season. That's the plan for me.
Sick, dude.
What about you?
What about you?
Yeah, I just want to get back in the Alpine, honestly. I have Russell in my sights, so just
Cool.
gonna try to talk this guy into going up there with me. And yeah, I just have Joshua Tree just started again, so him and I had a pretty stellar day out there a couple weeks ago. I just got back from Colorado on a work trip. I was looking at some pretty killer rocks out there. As far as climbing goes, I'm just all over. I want to get back down to El Potrero Chico. I did that last year, and
Nice.
just all the local stuff. Looking forward to Talkeet season again next season. All of our
You guys ever make it out to Red Rocks?
I have not. He did another shiver baby up there on epinephrine.
Yeah, I pulled an epic on
Oh,
epinephrine.
okay.
Epinephrine.
You guys weren't the ones that got stuck up there on the ice sheets, were you?
No. We did not end up getting rescued. We pulled a classic shiver bivvy and then simuled in the morning and then did the gnarly descent. So, I would say we probably set a record for the slowest descent or slowest ascent without a rescue, very possibly.
Okay.
But we did on-site. No falls, so.
Nice. Nice. Good for you guys.
Yeah, and then I did Dream of Wild Turkeys another time, which was really good. So I recently caught the bug for Red Rocks. I love it there.
Cool, man. Well, I live out here, so if you ever out here, give me a shout. We
All
got
right.
a place to stay and a partner to climb with.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, wicked guys. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it. It's been great to chat with you.